From the gridiron to the hardwood, James Mesh breaks it all down. It's time for another episode of Cleats and Sneaks.
The Boston Celtics are up 2-0 in the NBA Finals over the Dallas Mavericks, but there is an opportunity for them to now come back because of an injury that was sustained by a Celtics player just the other night. Welcome back to another edition of Cleats and Sneaks, the show where we talk about everything that's going on with the NFL and the NBA. And of course, we're going to focus on the association right now because of those finals, as the Celtics up 2-0 right now after that 107-89 win last Thursday in the TD Garden. And then it was a lot closer in game two, but they were still able to get it done 105-98 over the Mavericks, now headed to Dallas. But because of the injury that had happened in game two, late in the third or fourth quarter, Kristaps Porzingis, he had a rare injury that happened, and now this has opened the door for the Mavericks to potentially come back. Of course, Kristaps Porzingis, it was reported that he had suffered a torn medial retinaculum, allowing dislocation of the posterior tibialis tendon. Not quite sure what that means. I am by no sense a doctor. I did not try and get a degree in the medical field, so can't really tell you too much about that. Outside that, it's a injury that doesn't happen very often. So it really comes down to, how does Boston and Joe Mazzulla and the team coaching and medical staff, how do they want to attack this? Because Kristaps, he had talked about it post-game and even in press conferences leading up to tonight's game 3 against the Mavericks in Dallas, that he still wants to try and play if he's able to. He's going to try and do everything that he can to play. But because of the mysteriousness and you're not quite sure how to attack this injury, you may just play it safe and let him sit and rest a couple more days, as we wouldn't get to game 4 until Friday, June 14th. So you would give him a couple of extra days to rest, and hopefully, even if you don't win tonight, if you're able to get him and be relatively healthy and not worry too much about re-injuring it even further or injuring something else, you heading back to Boston with a 3-1 lead, that'd be absolutely phenomenal. But a big part of game 1 win was KP, as he was able to drop 20 points, 18 in the first half off the bench in 21 minutes of play. So, of course, super efficient type of game. And not only was he good offensively, but he was an absolute menace on the defensive side. If he wasn't blocking shots, he was getting very close and altering plenty of shots. Of course, I go back to that Josh Green transition dunk that he tried to have, but KP was able to block him, and he was able to make those type of plays all night long. And even though he wasn't as impactful on the offensive side in game 2, still put up a solid 12 points, blocked a couple more shots on the defensive side, and really locked down and took a part of the Mavericks offense that was used quite a bit and was a big part of their offensive production throughout the playoffs. Now, if he is going to be out, it's going to be a big one, because if you look at the plus minus with him on the floor compared to him not on the floor, with Kristaps Porzingis, the Celtics are plus 25 when he is playing on the floor, whereas when he's not playing or he's injured throughout these playoffs and really throughout games 1 and 2, it's just a dead even 0 when you look at games 1 and 2. So you can tell there's a big difference in the impact that Kristaps has for the Celtics, and he's really been a big difference maker, because not only has he been able to block a bunch of shots in the half court and in transition, but it would also mean that you would have to give Al Horford even more minutes, even though he had started games 1 and 2, relying on him and then relying again on Luke Kornet to play in those backup minutes. That's going to be huge, and that pretty much changes everything, because with Kristaps, because of his ability to also shoot the 3 ball, that kind of stretched Dallas's defense and put a lot more stress on them, because of his ability to take the threes and actually make them at a good clip, you have to respect it. So having a guy like Derek Lively or Gafford, instead of them being in the paint and clogging that up and not giving them easy shots, you have to push them out and have him respect Kristaps' ability to shoot the 3 ball. So now that he's not going to be there, sure, you still have to do that with Al Horford, but whenever you're going to bring in someone like Luke Kornet, who's not a 3-point shooter, sure, he's 100% from the field all season, but that's because he just took 1. That really makes a big difference. So if that's going to happen, instead of having open lanes and instead of having someone like Kyrie Irving, because of the way the Boston Celtics set up their offense, and having someone like Kyrie Irving or another player like Green end up being in the paint because maybe you move Drew Holiday or you scheme up Derek White to kind of get towards the paint to where that's your only rim protector at that point. Now you can have Lively or someone else and you can play more zone, or you're able to switch easier because you don't have to worry about that threat from 3-point range. But not only that for the defensive side, but because you won't be able to see Kristaps play defense if he isn't to play tonight. We're doing this more hypothetically. If Kristaps isn't going to play in Game 3 tonight versus the Mavericks, this also leads a lot of opportunities for lob threats because we'd seen that throughout the first 3 rounds in the Western Conference for the playoffs. We saw Luka and Kyrie throw plenty of lobs to guys like Green, to Gafford, to Derek Lively, to pretty much anyone else on that roster, even Derek Jones as well. You've seen guys be able to get easy dunks on transition or even when they go behind the baseline and they cut from behind from the corner. Those led to a lot of easy points in the paint for them, and that was a big part of their offense. But you didn't see that in the first 2 games, or at least the first game and 2/3, because once you saw Kristaps be slowed down by his injury, and I'm not going to try and say it again, because of him being slowed down, he wasn't able to react to those as fast, and you saw 2 or 3 of those dunks get them a little bit closer, make this an easier game. If that's the case, and Kristaps isn't going to play tonight, you could very easily see this be the best opportunity for the Mavericks to make this a series. This is going to be your last chance because not only have the Boston Celtics been 8-0 in their history when they're up 2-0 in a final series, but even if they win tonight and they go up 3-0, we've never seen a team come back from a 3-0 deficit. And even if they were to win tonight, I still feel like you have to give the Celtics the edge because without Kristaps Porzingis in the lineup, the Celtics are still 30-5, including in the playoffs without KP. So even though you would look at the Mavericks and you say they have a very good chance of being able to come back and making this 2-1, and sure, maybe you don't believe in the Boston Celtics because we had brought it up on today's shows, RP3, D'Lo, and Mesh, Footnotes, and for the Jordy Holberg show. A lot of our fans, a lot of people that listen to us, they don't believe in the Celtics. And sure, you look at how a lot of people in the national media have talked about it, and they even picked the Mavericks to win, and some of them even said in 5 or 6 instead of it being a 7-game series. You look at that and the Celtics having a commanding 2-0 lead, I still think I would give the Celtics the edge in this one because they played so many games even without KP, especially in the playoffs. The fact that they hadn't had him since Game 3 in the first round against the Miami Heat. They still were able to win in 5 against a good Cavs team. They were still able to sweep the Indiana Pacers in the Eastern Conference Finals. And even without Kristaps in Game 3, they were still able to close out that one and get 2 more wins after that. Not only with that is Luka Doncic, he's been suffering from quite a few injuries as well. Sure, he's going to be able to put up more likely not 30 points, and he's still going to be a huge factor. And the way the Celtics have played defense so far against him, it's kind of been a little bit more one-on-one, and every once in a while you'll trap him and try and force him into a bad shot or force him into a turnover with a bad pass. It hasn't worked every single time, but kind of putting that type of emphasis on him and making him have to score a majority of the points, as well as kind of forcing everyone else to not really be much of a factor because instead of putting 2 to 3 guys on him, like the Mavericks have done on Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown, anytime they try to drive or make some sort of move, you end up seeing 2 to 3 to even 4 or 5 guys crowding the paint and crowding that area. It leads to more open shots. So instead of giving Derek Jones Jr. or PJ Washington those type of open looks in either the corner or the wing threes, you still having a guy there and just forcing Luka, look, even though you're probably going to make 30 points anyway, you go ahead and do it, and we're going to try and force everyone else to have to make not open shots, but more contested shots. And a big part of that has been Kyrie, who has not been efficient. Sure, he's been able to make a couple layups even against KP and others, but whenever he's taking a three-point shot, he's 0 for 8 in the first 2 games. So Kyrie has to step up because Luka's still going to get his, nevertheless, whether he's injured or not. And these other guys like Derek Jones Jr., PJ Washington, Derek Lively, who's kind of gotten into foul trouble and has not been much of a factor on the offensive or defensive side, they need to take advantage of Kristaps Porzingis not playing because he's been the big difference maker. And then also on the Celtics side, if you're going to be able to win tonight without Kristaps Porzingis, you need to make sure that Jason Tatum, he needs to step up tonight. Because sure, Drew Holiday has been absolutely phenomenal. And also, happy birthday to Drew because he's been having an absolute phenomenal playoff run. Not just in this series, but even when you look at the Pacers, he played great. And then Jaylen Brown, he's been super efficient. But all those guys, including Derek White, Al Horford, Peyton Pritchard, he hasn't been able to shoot the ball very well. The only shot that he's made was that buzzer beater at the end of the third quarter in game 2 from about 38 feet. Sam Hauser as well. All those guys need to step up because the three-point shooting that I saw in game 2 was absolutely putrid. They didn't even shoot 26%. And for a team that lives and dies by the three, if you're not going to have one of those best guys that has been pretty much the difference maker for you so far in these finals, if you're not going to have him tonight and you still want to go up 3-0, those other guys like Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum, your supposed two best guys on the team, they're going to have to step up tonight. And Tatum cannot be shooting 6 for 22 anymore if that's going to happen. That's going to wrap it up for another edition of Cleats and Sneaks. Appreciate you listening in. Don't forget to like and subscribe to our YouTube channel, ESPN_SWLA. And also turn on the notification bell. That way you get notified anytime we upload any one of our podcasts or any sort of content. Because we don't do just podcasts here. It's not just Cleats and Sneaks with myself, but we also have the 4 Tire Change with Dawson Isolo. Matt Miguez does a couple of other podcasts with Golf with Over Par, as well as the Miguez Mindset. And then, of course, we have local content, whether it's the LSU Tigers, the Houston Astros, the Louisiana Raging Cajuns, the New Orleans Saints, who just started minicamp, and so much more. But until then, I'll talk to you next time.